How is everyone doing today? And in this video, we are going to be talking about our first rerun that we're going to be seeing in 2.6. And realistically, this might be the only time where I look at a rerun and kind of don't see any potential value in it, which kind of sucks. And yes, I will be talking about a couple of pros, a couple of cons, and why I feel about this. Because realistically, when looking at our first rerun for version 2.6, of course, we're going to be getting Rappa as our first character. And then our next character is going to be Dan Heng, who is going to be the rerun for the first half of the patch. Of course, we will talk about Akron and also Adventurine in a future video, but today specifically is going to be about Dan Heng Imbibitor Lunae. And realistically, when looking at Imbibitor Lunae and how he is in the meta right now, it kind of isn't in the best of places. Now, this isn't my build. For people that already want to critique, oh, your build sucks, that's why you don't like Imbibitor Lunae. No, I definitely have a good enough build with him. I just have the relic switched around. But for the most part, looking at Dan Heng right now in the game for the meta, he is a generation old DPS right now in terms of not only the damage he outputs, but also looking at the characters that have come out of recent, comes with the super DPSs, comes with the archetypes being built up upon all the time that's passed since Dan Heng's release. And I feel like Dan Heng's had a rerun already, if I'm not wrong, earlier in Panacani. I might be wrong about that, but when looking at Dan Heng, there is very few qualities right now that make it so that you should summon for him at the current moment versus when he came out, and also versus maybe the first time he rerun, if he has rerun before, which for some reason I have it in my head that he did rerun beforehand. Tell me in the comments if I'm wrong, just to let me know, just because I feel like it seems like he was here beforehand. But looking at Dan Heng currently, at the start of the game when he came out, his very high in skill point nature was a really good one for the most part. When it came to how much damage he was outputting, he was basically at that point in time one-shotting majority of the enemies, if not 3-shotting to 2-shotting bosses with this 3 skill point skill, and it was doing absolutely massive damage. Not only to couple it with Ting Yun, who's also helping with the tag, who's helping with damage, and also with someone like Bronya when they first came out, helping out with the massive amount of output that you were putting out with these characters together. It was just a lot in total in terms of what he was able to do. He was able to 1-shot, 2-shot, 3-shot characters, and that made him so valuable as a character back then. Of course, as time has gone by, these enemies have gotten a little bit tankier. Now it takes a little bit longer for Dan Heng to be able to take out enemies because, of course, as they get tankier, it takes a little bit longer. And also, we did get some more support with someone like Sparkle, who ends up playing into Imbibitor Lunae's playstyle very well. High skill point usage and wants skill points like crazy to be able to spam his 3 skill point bar. Having Sparkle on the team allows you to not only break the skill point barrier, but also allows you to regenerate skill points, be able to advance forward him, and also give you more damage based on the amount of skill points you're using, which overall helps Dan Heng by quite a bit. The problem now in this current day and age in the meta for the Starro meta, I guess you could say, is that Dan Heng has suffered the same way that Kafka and Black Swan has suffered, which is archetypes are being built out, archetypes are being made, and we're not seeing a lot of love for the previous archetypes. Right now, Hyper Carry and also Dot are currently in a really bad situation just because there hasn't been any new support coming out as of yet, as of 2.6. We have no idea for 2.7 with Rappa and Sunday. We're gonna have to wait and see, or Sunday and Ting Yun. We're gonna have to wait and see how that pans out for these 2 archetypes. But Dot and Hyper Carry has not seen a lot of love as of late, and this has them struggling in the DPS department, which puts them in a bad spot for the investment value that you may have for your account. When looking at characters like one of the future reruns like Akron, this is a super DPS similar to the way Fei Xiao is as well, with being a super DPS. And I want to give the super tag to the characters that are kind of irreplaceable, or the characters that are a league of their own, because looking at Fei Xiao, looking at Akron, these are characters that will infinitely grow as time goes by. Every new ally that comes out with one giving debuffs, Akron gets buffed, Akron gets a new teammate. Every single time there's an ally who can follow up a tag or a tag very frequently, that's another buff for Fei Xiao, which is a very big thing for them, which means that they have so much investment value and potential in the future to get better and better as time has gone by, and they're pulling out millions of damage with a couple skill points, with 1 or 2 skill points, while Dan Heng is very SP intensive and needs a lot of moving parts to be able to make sure that he's putting out as much damage as possible. And of course, looking at our super DPSs, also looking at the types of damage that are getting buffed up like crazy at the current moment. We currently have Topaz and Dr. Ratio doing really well with the follow-up archetype being built up like crazy with the inclusion of Robin. We also have the god tier break teams like with Firefly, like with Boo Hill, with the likes of Ruame, with the likes of HMC and Linksha. There's just been a lot of boosts to these teams right now when it comes to the super DPSs of Acheron and Fei Xiao, when it comes to the very strong teams of Firefly and Boo Hill. These teams at the current moment are at the very top of the game. Realistically, if you want to look past these characters when it comes to the follow-up characters, when it comes to the break team and the super DPSs like Fei Xiao and also Acheron, then we look at characters like Yun Li, who's able to have so many aspects to their kit and dish out so much damage all at once. There's just a lot of characters right now that have a lot of value in them, either if they're not being pulled or not. They just have a lot of aspects to their kits that do really well. While someone like Dan Heng, not only is the times changing for enemies having a lot more DPS or a lot more health, it takes a lot longer for Dan Heng to take them out, which means a lot more skill points have to be used, which puts a lot of strain on the other teammates. And if you don't have Sparkle, it makes it really hard to use. If you really like Dan Heng, if you really love the Astral Express crew, that is the only reason I would possibly ever say to be able to pull him. Because right now for Dan Heng specifically, him and aside from also Jing Liu, these characters are starting to lose their spice in the meta at the current moment. They have the damage to do okay damage. I'm pretty sure they can still beat MOC. I think a lot of the characters in this game with the right investment can easily beat out MOC if you pull them now or not. But realistically, when there's characters on the horizon, where there's characters that are currently being rerun very soon, and also teams that are being built out that are absolutely full with brand new characters, it's kind of a hard time to pull for a hyper carry when we haven't seen a support in so long for it. Now, this could change with the inclusion of Sunday, with the inclusion of Ting Yun, but realistically, looking at characters like Dan Heng and looking at characters that might come out in the future, you gotta think about it like this. If Dan Heng gets buffed by a character, this inadvertently buffs out a couple of other characters. This could buff out someone like Acheron. This could buff up someone like Fei Xiao, or whoever else may come out as a rerun very soon, or come out in the new region that we're probably going to get after 2.7 or 2.8 or whatever we want to go to the new region. That's going to be a whole new meta on its own. That's going to be another archetype that will be built up the same way Break is being so heavily pushed for right now, that it makes it really hard to pull for these way older units, especially with their outdated scalings. At the time when he came out, like I said, he was one-shotting stuff, two-shotting things. And realistically, if you're not going to pull E2 Dan Heng, it's probably not worth it to go ahead and pull out Dan Heng in the first place. Because right now, realistically, he just doesn't have the damage to equate equal to something like Fei Xiao or Acheron. He is currently struggling for future support or support at all for the hyper carry team. And same thing goes for Dot. That's why it was such a tough sell to get Kafka or Black Swan, because we haven't seen a lot of Dot support in such a long time that you might as well have shelled out for the break team or Acheron or having Fei Xiao or building up the follow-up team. Right now, it's just really hard to build different teams that aren't being supported because it takes you a lot longer to do these modes. It becomes a little bit less fun to see that you're taking forever to take down this one enemy, while other teams can just one-shot and be done with it, which kind of does suck for the most part. And it really does suck as well that inadvertently characters that have been made in the past kind of have no way to resurge unless there's a special mode for some reason. Let's say there's a new mode for Simulated Universe where you have to use as many skill points as possible. Then Dan Heng somehow becomes meta. But realistically, looking at MOC, looking at Apocalyptic Shadow, looking at Pure Fiction, you don't really get a say in when these older characters get to come back out and get to be used unless they're hyper specialized for them, which does suck for the most part. And we don't have any way to buff characters. If they were to buff characters in the future with like an event or like an awakening system or anything like that, that would be a reason to pull for older characters. But realistically, when looking at these very, very old characters, I think Dan Heng came out like 1.3, 1.4. yeah, it's been some time since that patch, and it's been some time since we've seen a lot of these other characters come out, like the follow-up team with Ratio, with Topaz, with Aventurine, with Robin specifically, with looking at characters like Acheron, Fei Xiao, we're looking at Young Lee, we have the Break team that's so good right now, who's basically able to curb stomp any single type of team that goes against it, or any wave that you put it against. Blue able to brute force their way through. Firefly is able to brute force their way through. There's just so many amazing things that these characters can do. Same thing with Acheron, brute force, Fei Xiao. Follow-up team is just disgusting right now. There's just no reason at the current moment, realistically, to pull out for Dan Heng. And this is the first time I'm saying this. I feel like when it comes to a rerun coming out, that you probably shouldn't pull them for the most part, which does suck because Dan Heng was a really fun unit in the past, and he was a really cool unit, and I do love Dan Heng's character. It's just that realistically, looking at the characters that we have now, looking at the characters that will be seen in the future, like Ting Yun and Sunday, even with their inclusion, maybe it's the hyper carry savior. Inadvertently buffing out someone like Dan Heng is going to inadvertently buff up someone else, either currently or in the future. That is going to put the investment value back to where it was. If a character was right here and Dan Heng was right here, and you add a support that puts Dan Heng up here, inadvertently you might be accidentally buffing another character back above Dan Heng, which does suck for the most part for the people that do want to see him thrive. It's the same way I feel about Blade. I do think Blade realistically is in the same situation. Even if he were to come back out, I would have to agree, even though this is by far my favorite character in the game. I love Blade. I love his playstyle, love his character, love his personality, love everything that has to do with Blade. I do think Blade is now outdated in terms of the meta. He has a cool kit. He plays similar in functions to Young Lee. I think Young Lee by far took that playstyle out of him for the most part. He doesn't do enough damage. Even with an HP scaling character that might come out, or a character that gives aggro, a character that gives action advance, a character that does anything to help out Blade, I just think realistically looking at Blade and the damage he does, even at max traces, the scaling just isn't there. You're not going to be able to buff out these characters unless you give them an awakening, you give them some type of new event that brings old units back into the current meta, which would be really cool, incentivizes you to pull for older characters. It is not going to be the case. A lot of these older characters like Blade, like Dan Heng, all these older DPSs are probably not going to function as they were before in comparison to the brand new units. Could they still beat MOC and get a 3-star? Yes, but you're probably going to struggle a bit. Blade has that situation happen quite a bit now, that we don't have a lot of win weak enemies, that a lot of these enemies take their time, a lot of these enemies have a lot of CC. There's a lot of things that go wrong when playing with Blade, when playing with a lot of these older characters, and it makes sense. They're currently building out new archetypes, they're currently building out brand new teams, and we're going to see a brand new meta very, very soon with the inclusion of the new region. So right now, Dan Heng is not in the best place to be able to summon on. I do say that if you are looking to build a DPS, if you're looking to get a brand new DPS, I would 100% say go for Acheron. I will be talking about Acheron in a future video in regards to why I think she is probably a must pull. I do think the super characters in this game are must pulls. Acheron, Fei Xiao, Robin, Ruan Mei. These are characters that will bring infinite potential, infinite investment value to your account, and they'll basically work on any team you pop them on. They'll basically run through any mode you could possibly ever want, and these are the characters you definitely want to pull for. Acheron being one of the characters that are rerunning, and then Aventurine as well is also a pretty big contender for priority in pulls as well, just because he's such a god tier sustain with being able to do damage, support, and also sustain your team. A lot of really good stuff that happens. Just point closed, there's a lot of better characters coming out. We have Harmony characters on the horizon, Nihility characters on the horizon. We have Aventurine, god tier sustain. We have Acheron, god tier DPS. Don't pull for Dan Heng. That's the only thing I want to say. Dan Heng is a really cool character. Sadly, we just don't have the support for hyper carry, and we also, the scalings for these characters aren't as what they used to be when they initially came out. So other than that, that's going to be it for this video. Let me know what you think about Dan Heng. Let me know if you're still going to pull for him, because if you are, hey, if you like the character, get the character, enjoy the game. That's the main point of the game. But other than that, thank you guys so much for watching. See y'all guys in the next one, and peace.